Hello, good evening, everyone. Welcome to another one of our Whiskey Me live tastings. I will be Tristan Stevenson for the evening. I say evening, I don't think it's going to take that long. Although, given the guest we've got and how much chat he's got, you never know. This one could pass the hour mark. I'm the co-owner of Whiskey Me. If you've been on any of these tastings before, then you will be familiar with my voice and my face, and indeed my backdrop. And we're although we're coming out of lockdown now, we are continuing these live tastings because we think they add a great deal of value to what we're trying to do here at Whiskey Me, which of course is appreciate really tasty whiskey because it tastes nice. This month there's not really any housekeeping. I know that many of you are waiting on your Glencairn glasses, which are being hand blown and hand etched as we speak. Actually, they're not hand blown or hand etched, but would love you to believe that there is that kind of personal touch to it. There's many of them going out, and you will be receiving them, but it does take about 6 weeks from the start of the order to the shipping time. So just be patient. They are en route. Tonight we have a fantastic whiskey. Well, I say that I have personally not tried this one. My business partner has, Tom, and a few other people on the Whiskey Me team, but this one is a new one to me. Highland Park Twisted Tattoo 16-year-old. Now, I think these sessions work a lot better when there's some discussion and it's not just me kind of rambling on about what I think about it and trying to do some sort of a tutored tasting to a laptop screen. So this week, rather than have anyone from Highland Park, I got someone with much better chat, in my opinion, which is one of my best mates and a real whiskey expert, an industry legend as well, someone who's very well regarded all around the whiskey industry and the drinks industry. And that is my good friend, Craig Harper. So I'm going to add him in right now. Hello, mate.
Hello, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm very good and I'm very excited. I've not had this one either. So this is brand new to both of us, which is quite cool.
Yeah, we'll just hopefully we're both going to love it. It on paper it sounds right up our streets because there's this red wine cask component to it, right?
Definitely. And it's, it's talking about red fruit and those sort of fruity notes and a little bit of shit, well, a little bit of that sort of smoke coming through, which I love. So that's why Highland Park's always a big tick box for me. But I think quite unusually, sherry bombs are always big with me. There's no sherry in this. A Highland Park with no sherry, which is unheard of for me. I don't think I've ever had one that hasn't had a
Yeah,
drop
I
of it
mean,
in there.
yeah, totally. I mean, whenever I think of Highland Park, I always think of this marriage between American oak casks and sherry casks. They're very famous for having sherry casks, but each of the individual age statement expressions, the 12 and so on, it's a different marriage of sherry casks and American oak that sort of defines the characteristic of it. So to have a whiskey that has no sherry component to it whatsoever is, well, really unusual for Highland Park, isn't it?
100%. Yeah, definitely. Still,
Um,
they got, well, it's Rioja, isn't it? So they're still coming from the same part of the world. They're not totally
yeah,
abandoning the Iberian Peninsula. They're still going to hang around there
exactly.
with the Rioja, but yeah.
Exactly. It's still a marriage of Spain and Scotland and America in there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Now you've
exactly.
been to Orkney. Have you been to how many times have you been to Orkney?
I've been 3 or 4 times up in Orkney. So I'm from the Highlands of Scotland, but I'm still a southerner to them. So it's about 120 miles as the crow flies below where I'm from, the Black Isle. And then you've got the infamous ferry ride because I don't fly, as you well know. I don't like it very much. But that's one of it's reputedly one of the roughest bits of water in the world because the tidal pull, you've got the Atlantic and the North Sea fighting through a comparatively narrow space. So it's always a good one to look on YouTube. There's some ferry disasters on there. There's some absolute classics. But no, I love Orkney. I adore it. I think I had one of my whiskey awakening moments on there as well. And Highland Park is obviously, synonymous for the island, that and Scapa, obviously. But yeah, it's an amazing place. It's very much. It's not necessarily Scotland. It's as much Norse as it is Scotland. And the people I know from there consider themselves Orcadian first. And I know we're probably going to chat about it. But Highland Park, some of the detractors are not very happy about the sort of Viking imagery that comes in now, but it's absolutely of itself because they generally believe that up there. It's part of the culture. I remember I was there for New Year, I think in 1998, and on the first we're staying. A friend of mine, Peter Mackay, he owns the farm with Garabreas, and it's his
Mhm.
nephew that I'm good friends with, and we stayed in a house there. And on the first, so we had Hogmanay in town, and then the day after, our job was to go around all the older people on the island, essentially to check they were okay because they've been drinking on their own. So more remote places, and every single place we went. So there's 4 of us. 3 of them had Orcadian connections, but I didn't. And they'd sit you down and they'd go through your whole family, and then they'd look at me at the end. They go, "But you look Norse, son. There's definitely some Vikings, so we can claim you as our own." So it's very much their culture, that sort of that Norse myth and legend. So it's not a fabrication. I think it's part of the story itself.
There's so much history there as well, isn't there? Because I remember when on a visit that I took, the one and only visit, they've got the standing stones there, which like predate Stonehenge by some considerable length of time. You know, it's
the ring of vodka.
That's it. Yeah, there's that old history, and then there's a really rich history during World War II as well, isn't there? Because it was the sort of Allied forces naval staging ground, wasn't it?
It's an amazing natural harbour. So you've got the Pentland Firth, which is really rough, but beyond that, on the sort of next bit of the island, is one of the most beautiful natural harbours in the world. But that's Scapa, but obviously that's got a good environment amongst it. But it's got massive connections. It was also the route, they called it the Shetland bus. So the resistance in Northern Europe used to come through, they used to get to Shetland and down to Orkney. So you had quite a lot of the Norwegian freedom fighters coming through that way as well. So it's got a big sort of synonymous history with that side of it as well.
I remember hearing from this distillery, Highland Park Distillery, that during the war, the distillery wasn't operational, or at least it wasn't operational for all of it. And some of the troops used to go and bathe in the washbacks in the distillery.
I didn't know that. That's amazing.
Yeah. So the washbacks is a technical term for where the fermentation is done. The big wooden vats that you find, them huge, great wooden vats, where all the fermentation takes place, where the yeast converts the sugars in the cereal into alcohol. It's where all the alcohol is made in the distillery. So if you can imagine like a wooden barrel, but multiplied by 100 in size, I mean, I don't know, you could probably fit 20 or 30 people by bathing at the same time in one of these things.
And you need a ladder to get down to it. I mean, they're huge. I mean, the size of it, you'd actually need a ladder to get in and out. So,
well, they're very deep, aren't they? Yeah, you'd be out of your depth very easily if you filled it right up. So, and the other thing, my other sort of lasting memory of Orkney is the wind. It's just incessant up there, isn't it? It never stops. To the point where, apart from like 1 or 2 exceptions, there's no trees on the island. It's completely like devoid of trees because they just can't stand the wind, right?
It's famous for that as well. So you tend to get trees down near the coast where it dips down a little bit, but once you go on top, there's nothing there, and there's nothing to stop the wind, from the Arctic, if it's coming from the north, or Scandinavia or America, essentially. So it does get, when the wind comes in, you definitely know about it. But it's some of the best surfing in the world because of that as well. So like back before surfing was as popular in the UK, I remember when we travel that north coast with the family, you'd see Australians and people who travel from all over the world because that wind builds up and over that period of time. But it's an amazing bit of the world. It doesn't look like the biscuit tin sort of Scotland. It's a little bit like the landscape of the moon a little bit. Do you know what I mean? You can see for a long way and it's undulating, but it's very of its place. It's amazing.
Yeah, and I don't think you can truly appreciate it until you've got sort of 40-mile-an-hour wind just blowing at you constantly. A photo doesn't quite describe that, does it?
No, definitely not, especially when you're going to get the ferry later and it's going to be a rough crossing.
Talking about the ferry videos, though, some of them are great because they're from the perspective of like an interior security camera, and so that's static, and therefore the floor appears to be static. The only reason you know that the water's rough is that everything's sliding.
And you see tables flying down. But the best thing is, if you look at the couple of them, it's the Kalmack ferries. They're very famous, but the staff all just take it in their stride, and you see people screaming and petrifying, and then there's someone delivering a cup of tea to someone because they're so used to it. It's such a commonplace thing happening.
I've never done the ferry up there. It has to be done at some point there. That'd be cool.
It's a beautiful drive, and we can go past some of your favourite distilleries. I mean, that's Clyne-Leash way, so we can hit Clyne-Leash and Brora and stuff like that on the way up. It's an amazing trip.
Of course, there's loads of, because Orkney's not one island, right? There's, I don't know, like 100 little islands. There are islets.
Yeah.
I believe Daryl Haldane told me this, that the shortest chartered flight or shortest scheduled flight in the world takes place between 2 of those little islands.
Yeah, it's a school drop-off, so it takes the kids from school and takes them back again at the end of the day, and you're in the air for, I don't even know if it's minutes, like it's a real short, but it's the most efficient.
It's like 90 seconds, 90 seconds or something.
Yeah. it's up and down, and that's it, job done. And even some of the more remote islands. So I've got friends, Arcadian friends, and they take kids in Monday to Friday in Kirkwall because they can't get back during the week. So they come in for the week, they stay, then they go home at the weekend. You know, they're traveling from all these little remote islands all over the place. And it's very Scandinavian. It's the same thing, you know, little islands where people are traveling into those areas, they're moving back again. So yeah.
That's true. Yeah, that is much more sort of a Scandinavian way of life, isn't it? Yeah. Right. Anyway, I think we probably, you know, we've done our bit for the Orkney Tourist Board.
Definitely go. It's amazing.
Do you go? I once heard that only 3% of Scottish people ever visit Orkney, and that's an incredible statistic to me because it's there, you know.
It's so far away. Like it's a good 6 hours from Edinburgh. Do you know what I mean? If you look at the M62, sorry, the M8 corridor with Glasgow, it's a lot farther. It's they can come to us in Cornwall almost.
Yeah.
It's so far away, and the ferry's not cheap. And it's what you're going to see while you're up there. But it's amazing. And history-wise, there's so much history on the island. There's so much Neolithic sites and like Maze Howe and stuff. And yeah, it's phenomenal.
Oh, one more thing because it's super whiskey related. You've been to the cathedral in Kirkwall, right? You heard that rumor that there's barrels of whiskey hidden within the pillars of the cathedral.
No, I didn't know that.
It might be another Daryl Haldaneism, I don't know, but apparently the legend says that there's barrels of whiskey in there.
That's amazing. And well, you know, it's synonymous to the island, isn't it? So that'd be phenomenal.
Indeed. Right. So Highland Park, let's drink it. I really want to taste this. Super keen. I am a serious sucker for red wine casks anyway. I personally feel that there is something about that dark, juicy cherry, blackberry, raspberry, sometimes it's strawberry characteristic that melds so deliciously with Scotch. It just brings out something that's present within the malt already without smothering it, which can so often happen with sherry casks. So this kind of thing is always really super exciting to taste, especially from a distillery like Highland Park, who really know how to put together a bottle of whiskey, you know.
I think it's one of the most amazing drams in the world. I mean, I think maybe it suffers from a success a little bit now where the geeks have moved on, but Highland Park 18 was one of the most exciting drams. When I first started getting into whiskey in a serious way, everyone had sort of hushed tones about Highland Park 18 when they did it. And it was John Ramsay. John Ramsay was the head distiller there. And he's the guy that put that blend together, malt, but blended the Highland Park on it as well. And he's another one for me. So it's another whiskey moment for me. So a job I had years ago, I used to go up to the distillery at Edgeworth, which is also one of theirs. And then when they had international guests, they'd start there, then move up. And I used to do the cocktails to this as well. So it's quite... Like you got John Ramsay, like the man who is responsible for Famous Grouse, a huge brand, Macallan, and put together Highland Park 18, which was considered the best thing that they made at that time as well. And he's there talking about whiskey, and then I'm making a cocktail with it 6 feet away. And I remember the first time I did it, I was like, he's going to hate me. Like, what's he going to think? And I remember it's Highland Park 12. I was using a little bit of honey, some lemon, and I think just a couple of Scottish raspberries, which are quite tart. But he said to me, and it stuck with me as well, he talked about the integrity of the whiskey, is that you can make any drink you want as long as I know what whiskey you used. And he says, you're not in trouble until you could have used any whiskey, and then you've sort of lost it. And that stuck with me as well. But he was the guy that did Highland Park 18, which for me is still one of the best drams I think I've ever had. It's like a totally surprising dram. So it's always exciting to try Highland Park.
But yeah, I'm with that. I think mixing whiskey is fine. But you need to be able to identify the whiskey underneath that. Otherwise, you kind of fuck with it too much, you know?
Yeah, you want to, especially if you spend some money on it, you want to enjoy it in a slightly different way. You don't want to just smother it, do you?
Yeah.
So I've not got my Glencairn glass yet either, so I'm using a Stella jar to keep it because I think it's my favourite glass. But
first thing I notice is that, I mean, I know this is, of course, a mixture of ex-bourbon cask, which, of course, is not the most commonly used cask in not
as red as I thought it was going to be, though, is it?
Yeah, that's my point. So when you'd find, like, say, 100% red wine cask or something that's been red wine cask finished, and I'm pretty sure Highland Park don't really practice finishing. It's basically like...
I've never heard them talk about it.
Yeah, it's in that cask and it's in that cask for life, and then of course it can be then blended with other casks, you know. But yeah, not red for something that you would expect. We're told is, you know, a Rioja cask is a big influence, but that's not to say it's not going to taste red. Although, you know, the way the whiskey looks can be quite an important factor in what we taste, right? I mean, you see something red.
Emotional journey starts with the eye.
Yeah, totally. First sips with the eye. So anyway, let's get involved in it.
So I am getting fruit off it. There's definitely fruit. Summer fruit, strawberries, and maybe raspberries more for me.
Yeah.
Bit peach.
Yeah, it is fruity for sure. I find it difficult to distinguish one from another, but I'm gonna have a taste.
There's still that bit of smoke. I mean, Highland Park, again, they're using a couple of different peats, aren't they, from the island? But it's still that little bit of sea spray, sort of smoky flavouriness to it as well. Because I remember you sending me a picture when you were up there, because you got stuck and had the most amazing bonfire on the beach, didn't you? Which I can only imagine that's the best way ever to drink Highland Park.
Yeah, we were. It was bad weather and we couldn't fly off the island, so we took a picnic. No, I say a picnic. The picnic consisted of whiskey, and went and lit a fire on Scapa Bay, and it was amazing. We were sat there just drinking Highland Park with this fire burning. There was 4 of us or 5 of us wondering where it had all gone so wrong, and just imagining if the Northern Lights decided to show up at that point, because you can get a glimpse of them from up there. It's so far north. Then it would have been entirely perfect, but sadly they didn't.
They're not predictable. They're definitely not predictable. That is good whiskey.
It is nice.
That's a lovely dram.
It is. I mean, for me, and I don't know how you feel about this, the red wine cask certainly isn't dominating, but it's present. And that's what I think about when I think about Highland Park. It's about this marriage of casks and finding, positive attributes to one and then another, mixing them together to create a whole that is not dominated by one or the other.
And I'm not meaning to sort of cast aspersions without the gimmicky of finishing, but often it's the word is as important as the flavour it gives. So I think Highland Park definitely look at what does this flavour do and how am I going to combine it. That's what that's. It's not. I mean, it's a different Highland Park. Definitely, it's not the one I'm used to, but it's little. The DNA is there, isn't it? So you can get the sort of flavours coming through. That little sea spray, a little bit of honey.
Well, this is it. I mean, there's not many distilleries in Scotland that have a peatiness that's in their whiskey, but not dominating it, and have that kind of maritime quality to it as well. I mean, really, we're looking at Talisker and Highland Park. That's about it.
Yeah, it's a beautiful balance of peat, isn't it? Exactly that. It's just it's salt and food, isn't it? Making everything else sort of come together.
Totally, yeah. And of course, they do their own
as well. So
sorry, go for it.
I was about to say that's the Midgard serpent, isn't it? So that's who kills Thor in the end. I don't know how you are on your Norse mythology, but
it is indeed the serpent. So which is eating its own tail. And this was I can't remember all the details off the top of my head, but it's by I believe an Orcadian tattooist who did the design.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he's the guy. It's one of Loki's children with the giantess. And the serpent bites its own tail and wraps itself around the world. But when it lets go of the tail, that's how Ragnarok kicks off. There's a great Norse legend about Thor going out fishing, and he catches the serpent, and he nearly manages to land it, and he brings it up to the fore. And then there's a giant with him actually, and they all get freaked out because the serpent's there, and he crashes down. But they become mortal enemies, and that's I think it's the one that Thor manages to get. I don't know, spoiler alert. Thor does kill it in the end, but he also dies himself. I think he gets poisoned. I think famously he walks like 9 yards and collapses afterwards. But the serpent that's a key part of Norse mythology. So I've been saving that one for a good story and a good drama, I think. So.
Well, yeah. So what I take from that is that it's bad when serpents stop eating their own tails, because Ragnarok's sort of end times. So is that sort of a challenge to not stop drinking until the bottle's finished? Is that the idea, do you reckon?
Cork in the fire. It's always the way, isn't it? Cork in the
fire. All right, then. So closing thoughts on this. Is it going to go down as like a legendary Highland Park? I think it's pretty freaking good, actually.
I think it's slightly off the Highland Park DNA to be a legendary Highland Park, but I think it's a great it's about 100 quid, isn't it? It's worth that money. I mean, because Highland Park is another one. It does suffer from its success a little bit, and it sort of creeps up. But I think it's delicious. I'll definitely have another one when I'm in the bar.
Yeah, I'm gonna probably finish this tonight, to be honest with you. It's I don't think it's quite 100. I think it retails about 65, 70. It's not a cheap bottle, obviously. It's Highland Park.
It's a bargain then, because how old is it? It's about 15, 16. It's 16 years old. That's a bargain for Highland Park. So
it is. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a good price. We've got a couple of comments and questions coming through. Wait a second. If I can actually try and do this properly this week, I think I can get them put up on the screen. So let's see whether I have the power to do that. There we go. Lorna, I've enjoyed every Whiskey Me selection since I started my membership, but I really don't like this. I should have read this one before I actually put it up.
I think she's hit the nail, though. There is a saltiness to this. She's 100% right, and either love it or you don't. But Talisker has it as well, and I love it. But I guess it's that peat, not peat, and there can't be salt in here, can it? I'm sure you've explained this to me about 5 times when I'm drunk, but it definitely has that sort of sea spray characteristic to it. So I kind of hear what Lorna's saying.
Yeah, I mean, with peat, there can be a certain degree of like terroir to a whiskey. It's one of the only ways, in my opinion, where terroir plays into whiskey, because you know, the terroir of the cereal you're using is unlikely to factor into the end product, just because there's so many steps of production that are likely to diminish any individuality or nuance that cereal had. But with peat, the different area in which it's cut, or the different island, or different mainland, the vegetation can impact it. And the peat they use at Highland Park, it's one of the few distilleries that do their own malting, some of their own malting, and they make their own peated barley. And that particular vegetation, where the peat bogs are, and I've actually cut peat there, will be quite specific to that island. And perhaps there's something that's getting into there that has this maritime quality. It wouldn't be saltiness, because saltiness doesn't permeate through smoke and then into the barley, but it may be something that triggers or amplifies a certain salinity that's present within the whiskey, and sort of elevates it, so that, because it is a little bit salty,
This Whiskey Me viewers, this could be the argument me and Tristan have every time we're drunk about what you can and can't taste in whiskey, which we have a couple of. So I definitely think that's salty. There's definitely a little bit in it, whereas Tristan will give you the science, but emotionally, that definitely tastes like it's come from the sea.
No, I'm with you.
Yeah.
No, it does taste salty. I'm just saying it doesn't come from the peat. I don't even know why I bothered talking about peat, and then kind of undid everything I was saying. But
another memory of the distillery. Do you remember the swallows? When you went into the I don't know what time of the year it was, but they had the date when the swallows appear and when they leave, because they have swallows nesting in the kiln room. So when you go in the kiln room, there's a board there, and there was a couple of dates. And when I walked in, I was like, "What's that? Is that the guy that runs the kiln there for years? Just he writes the day they come and writes the day they leave, and there's like you can see the whole journey of it all the way through, and that's a long way for a swallow to go to get to Orkney. I mean, it's a warm place, I guess, to bring up a family, but that's another. When you mention the peat, it's another memory of mine being by the fire as it's going through, and then the swallows coming through the window.
Most of my memories are just dealing with wind, not like flatulence, but dealing with the constant bombardment of wind. And then I remember going out in the evening and playing quite a lot of pool, and being made to feel like I shouldn't be playing pool on that pool table, and that I should probably leave the bar. Duncan, I'm seriously liking this one. Honey, as you said, also, so maybe it's one of these whiskies that's quite divisive. I can certainly see why that saltiness is going to be a problem for some people, but I think there's many things to find that you can enjoy in there too.
One of the things I always think about Highland Park is heather honey and sherry. That's two of the flavors I always sort of associate with it. So even this, although the sherry's not here, you've got the lovely fruitiness, the wine, but I still get the honey in it, definitely.
Yeah. The honey is, if you asked someone working for Highland Park, I think the flavor descriptor honey would come up very quickly. It's in a lot of their marketing materials, and it really does sort of transcend across the brand. Yeah. Amazing. Okay. Well, look, we'll close it up there. Craig, thank you so much for stepping in and doing this. I think if you're up for it, what we'll do is anytime I can't get a brand ambassador, I'll basically just call on you to come in and do the tasting.
I'm happy to be the poor man's ambassador that comes up for it. And viewers, I actually buy my own whiskey. I don't even get free whiskey out of it because I'm a subscriber as well. So, I don't know what I need to do to get a free dram. Maybe I'll get an extra one sometime. We'll see how it goes.
We will send you some extra characters to compensate you for your time, which is very valuable, and we're very grateful for it. So, cheers.
Not at all. My pleasure. Thanks very much. Thanks for sharing.
All right. Thanks for joining, everyone. We will see you in a few more weeks for August dram. Cheers.